even having a personal experience like I did with my mom, when I met you several years ago for Advocacy Day, you really opened my eyes to this issue of young survivors and everything. And I even learned something from you, And so in the science field, Dr. Wahl, I was wondering if you could say quickly, because you are unique in that you have this resident patient advocate, and Komen is requiring that in all grant applications. And I know you're a huge advocate for including them, and you, prior to Bianca, didn't have a resident advocate. So if you could kind of talk about what the difference that is that makes and why it's so important.
I am a huge advocate of that. I think part of the reason for that comes from my wife, who would through HIPAA she couldn't tell me who she was treating, but she was telling me about the cases, and I understood that by being president of AACR, I would often go to Hill Day. And when I would go to Hill Day, which is going and speaking with our representatives, and I would go with cancer survivors and hear their stories, it really moved me. And I didn't know how to enlist an advocate in our lab, and it was this chance meeting with Bianca. And
that's so great.
Or as I call it, Providence.
Providence. We have a great chemistry together too. We've even worked on things that we haven't talked about here, on new models for funding science. And Bianca, you might want to tell them about what you've learned about that.
Yes. So much to talk about and so little time to get everything in. But I do want to say that thanks to Komen, they're really wonderful about honoring high risk research, because high risk brings high reward, and that's the kind of thing that the NIH doesn't necessarily want to embrace. So thank you for that, Komen.
No, thank you for what you guys do.
Oh, absolutely. And what was the?
Well, it was, it had to do with, I think when you started, we started to talk about funding, and I started to talk to you about how much, cancer is a disease that affects absolutely every person in this country.
So the government, it spends very, very little per person. You would think that they do, and they certainly, they spend on the average about the price of a latte. Or less than that per person.
Four lattes per year. Don't underestimate.
Okay.
It's about $6 billion. If you think about the cost of the wall that the president is talking about, that would fund all of cancer research, including all of the clinical trials for 1 year. So I think we have to talk about opportunity costs.
Well, it's a leadership issue.
It's a leadership issue.
And that's one of the things that I've learned. As I mentioned before, I was in advocacy before I met Jeff, but being a resident advocate in his lab all this time has really opened my eyes to the critical need for research funding and how difficult it is. And the scientists, not only they depend on it, but they depend on it. They need it to be predictable and sustainable, which it's not. And for example, when the economy had a crunch just a few years back, there were scientists who had spent years getting cultivating experiments that every little parameter and nuance has to be exactly this way. And then when the funding drops out, they have to lose the experiment, and then they have to start all the way back to square one when they get funded again. So it really is critical for the continuity of the research, and it's very difficult to get the funding. So we've looked at exploring private ways of getting funding, and we've had ideas we've worked on together with business leaders in the community. So I've had an incredible education in not only scientific research and the scientific aspects, but in the critical need for funding and how difficult it is. And again, I want to applaud Komen, because they have been a wonderful organization in research. Not only research and support as well, support in the community, but the research is what will change the horizon.
And, I think the other thing about Komen, and there are some other organizations that do this as well, but the idea of embedding the advocates, of requiring the advocates to be part of the research. From my own experience, when Bianca's in the room, even when she's not, because her presence is always felt, even virtually, I'm asking myself the question in the experiments that we're planning, well, does this really have an impact on people with cancer? Is this just a theoretical thing that's kind of interesting to know about, or will it really make an impact? And we're always factoring that in to the experiments that we do, because every experiment we do costs money, and the money that we spend means that we may or may not be able to do something else. And so we're always putting that in, and I bring that up to everybody in the lab, and certainly when Bianca's there, she'll bring it up. And one of the things that I do also that's very important is that I've required each person in the lab who's presenting a lab meeting to spend the first 5 minutes speaking in terms that a layperson will understand. I think this is critical. I think scientists haven't done a good enough job at this. And I think that's one of the reasons why people probably don't understand the complexities of the cancer problem, how we're going about doing it, and how we're trying so hard every day to make progress. And it's to help people who we love and have had experiences with cancer.
It's interesting because, well, you'd think naturally that it's hard for me to understand a lot of the scientific jargon, and especially when it gets very, very over my head. But it's also difficult for those scientists to speak down to a level that a layperson can understand. So I think it's such a great exercise for them, and they really kind of learn that's a skill that they had not necessarily used before, and they have to start learning to use that. And I think that's only going to help them in their careers.
Yeah, we were talking about that earlier before the show started about you have to be able to communicate. You know, if, like, for example, we're talking about my daughter wants to be a doctor, and I told her, ultimately, listen, the academics and all those things are important. You have to be able to communicate with people.
Bedside manner.
No question about it. And you're right. And but you addressed one of my questions. So I guess let me turn to Lizzie for a second, because I was going to ask you, Dr. Wahl, if most of the labs have advocates, and it sounds like they don't. But it sounds like you highly recommend they should.
I every time we have so I'm also the assistant director of our cancer center, and every time we have a meeting, I say, you know, you guys really need to enlist an advocate. I think they don't know how to do it.
Well, maybe is this a Komen project that maybe is there something here where almost like, you know, with CASA, child advocates in the foster care system, is there a patient advocate embedded in a research project that Komen might be able to entertain?
Yeah, so we require it for all of our research funding, and we also have a program we talked about before, Advocates in Science, where any survivor who is interested in doing this can go through training and get the tools to feel comfortable and to be able to do this, and then get matched in a database for researchers to be able to.
The other thing that Komen has is they have their Advocates in Science program. I was on that program, and we made a PowerPoint presentation that we send out to all applicants, saying, this is what you need to do, this is how you can make best use of your advocate, these are the kind of things that you should be engaging with them. Know them as a person, not just as a person who's there to learn about your science and serve this function for Komen. And then how you communicate.
Right. So I know Komen's doing it for your labs. The question is, now, how do you use that leadership position to get everyone around the country rallying around this model?
Right. Yeah. Well, it's interesting. So we have a metastatic breast cancer conference coming up on March 5th, and Dr. Wahl spoke at it last year, and Bianca attended as well. And this year,
Barbara spoke at it.
And yes, and your wife, Dr. Parker. Yes. And this year it was focused for researchers and scientists last year, and physicians. And this year we're including patients, and part of it is going to be this education. The process of research clinical trials to bringing a new drug or therapy to market, and the roles that patient advocates play in the research and also in clinical trials and things like that. And we will have resources there, and we're inviting lots of different partners to be a part of that. So we're hoping to really get that going. And also through our Breast Health Collaborative, we've been trying to work, at least in San Diego County, through our affiliate, in really advocating for this as well. And I think also we have a dinner coming up April 11th, our More Than Pink annual dinner. It'll be in La Jolla. And there we'll be talking to Dr. Jabari, who is an oncologist radiation specialist, and one of his patients, Lillian, who was our honorary survivor this last year. And they're going to be talking about this a little bit as well. So I think just getting the education and the community involved in knowing that these things are going on is really important, and we're trying to push it in the community that way as well as these other programs.
And I think what's unique, just to wrap this thought up, there are a lot of advocates.
No, keep going. Good. Finish that thought.
Okay. There are a lot of advocates that are solicited to help work on a grant, and then they may work on one grant for one scientist, another grant for another scientist. What's unique about our relationship is that I only work with the Salk lab, and they work with me ongoing.
That's great.
For 7 years.
Bianca, thank you for squeezing in. And you've been listening to The Last Battle. And we'll be back next week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I've been bragging about Progressive Medical Center to you guys for years, and I'm so excited to have Dr. Agoli with us because, Dr. Agoli, a lot of people walk through your doors, and some of their biggest problems are they're just fatigued, they're tired all the time, and even though they're dieting and exercising, they cannot get the weight off. Why is that?
It's a combination of poor metabolism, inappropriate eating, but more importantly, it's due to a lack of education and really doing the right testing. A lot of our patients are metabolically compromised. What does that mean? Their metabolism is not functioning. The metabolism is responsible for all physical and chemical processes necessary to sustain life, and that includes energy. And without cellular energy, your body is not going to be a burning machine. Let's get back and teach our listeners to be a fat-burning machine.
It's been a lot easier to maintain my weight since Progressive Medical Center started treating me with all-natural supplements, learning proper nutrition, and that can be you today. No more frustrations about being tired or overweight. So why don't you get a hold of Progressive Medical Center today through progressivemedicalcenter.com.
This is your life, live it well.
You take your smartphone almost everywhere you go. Now WSRadio.com can be there too. Search WS Radio in the Play Store for your Android devices or iTunes for Apple and download the WS Radio application. WSRadio.com on your phone and in your ear everywhere you go. Download the WS Radio application. Do it now. It's very easy. WSRadio.com.
Do you want to be a professional coach? Are you in business trying to make a real difference with people you manage or work with? Have you started a coaching practice that isn't quite getting off the ground? Get the skills you need to be a successful coach today with the Coaches Training Program from Accomplishment Coaching. The Coaches Training Program will show you how to help others focus and be more fulfilled. Whether you want to improve your company's bottom line or create a thriving coaching practice, Accomplishment Coaching can give you the distinctions and practices you need to coach others effectively today. Accomplishment Coaching has spent 6 years developing a cutting-edge coaches training program that will have you ready to coach people professionally in just 12 months, and you don't have to take time off work to do it. To find out more about the Coaches Training Program, just call 1-888-548-6813. That's 1-888-548-6813.
This is Bill Gruber with BizVid Communications, a Southern California video production leader. We've been honored to sponsor, produce, write, and host many of the fine programs on WS Radio over the years. So we understand how important the internet and your website exposure are. As video producers, we know the tricks and secrets to incorporate video to increase your search engine optimization and business success. Visit bizvidcommunications.com to see what we can do for you. BIZVID communications.com.